The morning sun crested the distant mountains as Zara Donovan stood at the edge of Monticello, Wyoming territory, clutching a small bundle of belongings. Her world collapsing around her like the abandoned mine shafts that dotted the hills beyond town. The dust from the departing carriage that had brought her this far settled on her worn boots, a physical manifestation of the way her former life was settling into the past. It was 1876, a time when a woman's worth was measured by the children she could bear, and after 5 years of marriage with nothing to show for it but the growing contempt of her husband's family, Zara had been cast out. The Wilkins family of Denver had no use for a barren wife, regardless of how much their son Thomas had once claimed to love her. Now, at 26, she found herself starting over in this frontier town, where nobody knew her name or her shame. Monticello wasn't much a collection of wooden buildings strung along a dusty main street, with the snow-capped peaks of the Wind River Range rising majestically in the distance. The town had sprung up a decade earlier, when prospectors found gold in the nearby hills, but it had managed to survive even after the mines began to play out, evolving into a supply stop for ranchers and a trading post for those brave souls pushing further west. Zara adjusted her simple gray dress and smoothed her chestnut hair, tucked beneath a practical bonnet. She had enough money to last a month, perhaps 2 if she was frugal. After that, she would need to find work. With a deep breath that tasted of alkali dust and wood smoke, she took her first steps into Monticello, her new home by necessity rather than choice. Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker's boarding house stood at the northern end of the main street, a 2-story whitewashed building with green shutters and a small, well-tended garden that seemed almost defiant against the harsh Wyoming landscape. The elderly woman who answered Zara's knock had sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her appearance, from her quality but dusty dress to the small gold locket around her neck, the last gift from her mother before consumption had taken her. "I've got 1 room available, Mrs. Whitaker said, her voice as crisp as the autumn air. $5 a week includes breakfast and supper. No gentlemen callers allowed upstairs, no drinking, and no coming in after 9 o'clock. I run a respectable establishment." "That suits me perfectly, Mrs. Whitaker," Zara replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'm a respectable woman." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "Most who come here claim to be. Time tells the truth of it. You have a name, girl, Zara Donovan, Mrs. Donovan." "Miss," Zara answered automatically, then amended, "Mrs. Donovan. I'm widowed." The lie came easier than she expected, sliding off her tongue like butter from a hot knife. Mrs. Whitaker's eyes showed she didn't fully believe the story, but she nodded nonetheless. "Your room is the 3rd door on the right upstairs. Supper's at 6 sharp. Don't be late, I don't hold meals." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand with a chipped porcelain basin, a small writing desk, and a window that looked out over the dusty street. Zara sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back to spill down her cheeks. She'd lost everything: her husband, her home, her standing in society, all because her womb remained stubbornly empty. After allowing herself precisely 10 minutes of self-pity, Zara dried her eyes, washed her face in the cool water from the pitcher, and set about making a plan. She needed work, and soon. The next morning, after a breakfast of cornmeal mush and strong coffee shared with Mrs. Whitaker and 2 other boarders, a school teacher named Miss Abernathy, and a clerk from the general store named Mr. Peterson, Zara ventured out to seek employment. The town was livelier by daylight, with wagons rumbling down the main street, cowboys riding in from neighboring ranches, and shopkeepers sweeping the boardwalks in front of their establishments. Zara had skills. She could read and write. She had a fair hand with numbers, and she had been trained to run a respectable household. Surely one of these businesses could use her help. By midday, however, her hope had diminished considerably. The general store already had a clerk. The hotel had a housekeeper. The saloon. Well, Zara wasn't desperate enough yet to inquire there, though the knowing look the barkeep gave her as she hesitated outside suggested that work of some kind might be available. It was outside the town's small newspaper office, the Monticello Sentinel, that Zara found her first stroke of luck. A sign in the window read, "Assistant needed, must be literate and reliable." Before she could lose her nerve, Zara pushed open the door, setting a small bell jingling. The office was cluttered but organized, smelling of ink and paper dust. A printing press dominated the rear of the room, while the front contained a desk piled high with papers, a typewriter, and several shelves of reference books. A man stood with his back to her, hanging a freshly printed page on a drying line. "Be with you in a moment," he called without turning. Zara took the opportunity to remove her bonnet and smooth her hair, wanting to look presentable for this potential employer. When the man finally turned, she found herself looking into the most startlingly blue eyes she'd ever seen. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with light brown hair that curled slightly at the collar of his shirt. He wore no jacket, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw shadowed with stubble and laugh lines at the corners of his eyes, though he wasn't laughing now as he studied her with frank curiosity. "Can I help you, madam?" he asked, his voice deep and pleasant. Zara swallowed and gestured toward the window. "Your sign. You're seeking an assistant." The man wiped his ink-stained hands on a rag and stepped closer. "I am Samuel Dawson, editor and owner of the Sentinel." He extended his hand, then seemed to think better of it, glancing down at the ink still staining his fingers. "Zara Donovan," she replied. "I've just arrived in Monticello and I'm seeking employment. I can read and write very well, Mr. Dawson. I was educated in Boston before." She trailed off, unsure how much of her fabricated history to share. "Before what, Mrs. Donovan?" he prompted. "Before my husband passed," she said, the lie coming more easily this time. "I've come west for a fresh start." Samuel Dawson studied her for a long moment, and Zara had the unsettling feeling that he could see right through her story. But instead of calling her out, he merely nodded. "Can you type?" he asked, gesturing to the typewriter. "I can learn quickly," she promised. "Know anything about running a newspaper?" "No, but I'm intelligent and hardworking." A small smile curved his lips. "Modest too, I see." Zara felt a flush rise to her cheeks but held his gaze. "I don't believe in false modesty, Mr. Dawson. I need this position, and I will work harder than anyone else you might consider." To her surprise, Samuel Dawson laughed, a rich, warm sound that seemed to fill the small office. "Well, Mrs. Donovan, that's the most honest thing I've heard all day. I can pay $3 a week to start. Hours are 8 to 5, Monday through Saturday. We put the paper out every Wednesday and Saturday. Can you start tomorrow?" Relief flooded through Zara so intensely that for a moment she feared her knees might buckle. "Yes, Mr. Dawson, thank you." "Sam," he corrected her. "Everyone calls me Sam." "Thank you, Sam," she said, the informality feeling strange on her tongue. In Denver, such familiarity would have been scandalous, but this was Monticello, and the rules were different here. "Welcome to the Sentinel, Mrs. Donovan." "Zara," she replied, finding herself smiling for the first time since arriving in town. "If I'm to call you Sam, then you must call me Zara." As she left the newspaper office, Zara felt a lightness in her step that had been absent for months, perhaps years. She had a job. She had a place to stay. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And for the first time in a very long while, Zara Donovan had hope. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with frost sparkling on the boardwalks as Zara made her way to the newspaper office. She'd put on her best dress, a navy blue wool with minimal trim, hoping to make a good impression on her first day. Sam was already there when she arrived, the sleeves of his white shirt again rolled up as he worked at setting type. "Good morning," he greeted her with a nod. Ready to learn the newspaper business, the day passed in a whirlwind of instruction. Zara learned to operate the typewriter, a skill that proved easier than she'd anticipated. She organized the chaotic filing system, took notes as Sam explained the process of laying out the paper, and even contributed a few suggestions for articles that might interest the women of Monticello. "Most newspapers ignore half their potential readers," she explained when Sam raised an eyebrow at her suggestion for a column on household management. "Women make many of the purchasing decisions for their families. If you want to attract more advertisers, appeal to the women." By the end of that first week, Zara had proven herself indispensable. She had a good eye for layout, caught errors that Sam missed in his articles, and had already begun to draft short pieces of her own. The Saturday edition of the Sentinel included a small column titled "Domestic Notes by ZD" that offered practical advice on removing stains from clothing and preserving autumn vegetables. Working alongside Sam was easier than Zara had anticipated. He was demanding but fair, passionate about his newspaper and the town it served. He seemed genuinely interested in her ideas and treated her with a respect that had been increasingly absent in her marriage. As the weeks passed, Zara settled into life in Monticello. She made the small room at Mrs. Whitaker's more homey with a colorful quilt purchased from a traveling peddler and wildflowers gathered on Sunday walks. She became friends with Miss Abernathy, the schoolteacher, occasionally joining her for tea after church services. She even began to recognize the regular patrons at Harrington's General Store and exchange pleasantries with them. No one questioned her story about being a widow. In a frontier town where many came to start fresh, pasts were seldom scrutinized too closely. If Mrs. Whitaker harbored suspicions, she kept them to herself, seemingly satisfied by Zara's prompt payment of rent and quiet demeanor. It was at the beginning of her second month in Monticello that the telegram arrived that would change everything. Zara was alone in the newspaper office, Sam having ridden out to investigate reports of cattle rustling at one of the outlying ranches. The telegraph operator's boy delivered the message with the casual indifference of someone too young to understand that words on paper could shatter lives. The telegram was addressed to Samuel Dawson, but in his absence, Zara opened it, thinking it might contain news for the paper. What she read made her blood run cold, seeking information on whereabouts of Zara Wilkins, née Donovan. Brown hair, green eyes, 26ers, left Denver September 3rd. Married, not widowed. Reward offered. Contact Thomas Wilkins, Denver. Zara sank into Sam's chair, the telegram trembling in her hands. Thomas was looking for her. Had he had a change of heart? Or more likely, had his family decided that the scandal of her disappearance was worse than the shame of her barrenness? Either way, it didn't matter. She wouldn't go back. But now her lie was laid bare, and when Sam returned, he would know. The thought of seeing disappointment or, worse, disgust in those blue eyes made her stomach twist painfully. In the months she'd worked alongside him, Zara had come to value Sam's good opinion more than she cared to admit, even to herself. She was still sitting there, staring at the damning telegram, when the bell over the door jingled and Sam walked in, bringing with him the scent of horse and open air. He was smiling, his face animated as he removed his hat and coat. "You'll never believe what old man Jenkins told me about those rustlers," he began, then stopped abruptly when he saw her expression. "Zara, what's wrong?" Wordlessly, she held out the telegram. Sam crossed the room and took it from her, his eyes scanning the brief message. The silence that followed seemed to stretch endlessly. "I can explain," Zara finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I think you'd better." And so, sitting in that small newspaper office as the late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, Zara told him everything. How she had married Thomas Wilkins at 21, full of hope and dreams. How those dreams had slowly died with each passing month that brought no sign of a child. How Thomas had grown distant, his family increasingly critical. How, finally, he had told her that their marriage was over, that his family had arranged an annulment on grounds of her deficiency, and that she would be given a small settlement to disappear. "I couldn't bear the humiliation," she concluded, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. "To be cast aside like something defective, to have everyone in Denver society whispering about poor Thomas Wilkins and his barren wife. So I took the money and came west. I thought I could start over where no one knew me or what I lacked." Sam had listened without interruption, leaning against his desk, arms crossed over his chest. Now he straightened and paced to the window, looking out at the main street of Monticello. "Why the widow story?" he asked, his back still to her. Zara wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. It seemed simpler. A widow is an object of sympathy, not scandal. A woman abandoned by her husband raises questions. I didn't want questions. Sam turned to face her, his expression softening slightly. "You should have trusted me with the truth." "I barely knew you," she reminded him, "and now that you do know, I'll understand if you want me to leave." "Leave?" Sam repeated, genuine surprise in his voice. "Why would I want that? Because I lied? Because I'm still legally married? Because she couldn't bring herself to say the word that had defined her for so long. "Because you're what?" Sam prompted, moving closer. "Intelligent, hardworking, the best assistant this newspaper has ever had." "You know what I am," Zara whispered, looking down at her hands. Sam crouched down in front of her chair, forcing her to meet his gaze. "I know exactly who you are, Zara Donovan. You're a woman who refused to be defined by other people's expectations. You're someone who had the courage to start over with nothing but her wits and determination. And if Thomas Wilkins was fool enough to let you go, then that's his loss, not yours." Zara stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You're not angry about the deception?" Sam shook his head. "We all have parts of our past we'd rather leave behind. God knows I do." He rose and returned to his desk, picking up the telegram. "The question is, what do you want me to do with this?" "What do you mean?" "I could ignore it, throw it away and pretend it never arrived, or I could respond, tell this Thomas Wilkins that you're not here." Zara considered for a moment. "No," she finally said. "No more lies, but I won't go back either." Sam nodded. "Then I'll write to him, tell him you're safe and starting a new life and that he should respect your wishes and leave you be." Relief washed over Zara. "Thank you, but what if he comes anyway?" "Then he'll have to deal with me," Sam said, with a fierce protectiveness that warmed Zara to her core. "And the rest of Monticello, we look after our own here, our own." The simple phrase brought fresh tears to Zara's eyes. After months of feeling adrift, she suddenly felt as though she belonged somewhere to someone. It was a dangerous feeling, one she knew she shouldn't indulge. Sam was her employer, perhaps her friend, but nothing more. She had a husband, even if in name only, and the law was clear on such matters. Yet as Sam carefully composed a reply to the telegram, his brow furrowed in concentration, Zara couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to truly belong to this man who defended her without hesitation, who saw her worth beyond her ability to bear children. The following Sunday, Zara attended church services as usual, sitting beside Miss Abernathy in their customary pew. She tried to focus on Reverend Taylor's sermon about the prodigal son, but her mind kept wandering to Sam and the telegram. He had sent his response the day before, and now there was nothing to do but wait and see if Thomas would respect her wishes or pursue her across half a continent. As the congregation filed out after the final hymn, Zara found herself face to face with Beatrice Montgomery, the wife of Monticello's mayor and the town's self-appointed arbiter of propriety. Mrs. Montgomery was a formidable woman in her 50s, with iron-gray hair pulled severely back beneath an elaborate hat and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Donovan," she said, with a nod that was just barely civil. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Beatrice Montgomery." "How do you do, Mrs. Montgomery?" Zara replied, forcing a smile. "I understand you're working at the Sentinel with Mr. Dawson." It wasn't a question, but Zara nodded anyway. Most unusual for a widow to take employment rather than seek remarriage. "I find the work satisfying," Zara said carefully. Mrs. Montgomery's gaze traveled over Zara's modest dress and simple bonnet, clearly finding them lacking. "Well, we all must do what we must, I suppose, though I do wonder what a woman of your circumstances is doing in our little town." Denver society must have been quite different. Zara felt a chill. How did this woman know she was from Denver? Had word of Thomas's inquiry somehow reached her already? "I needed a fresh start after my husband's passing," Zara said, sticking to her story. "Of course, Mrs. Montgomery replied, in a tone that suggested she believed nothing of the kind. "Well, welcome to Monticello, Mrs. Donovan. I do hope you find what you're looking for here." With that, she swept away, leaving Zara with the distinct impression that she had just been sized up and found wanting by the one person in town whose opinion could make or break her. "Don't mind Beatrice," came a deep voice from behind her. Zara turned to find Sam standing there, looking uncommonly presentable in a clean shirt and string tie. He nodded toward Mrs. Montgomery's retreating form. "She treats everyone that way at first, thinks it's her duty to keep Monticello respectable." "I think she knows something," Zara said in a low voice, falling into step beside Sam as they left the church. "Knows what, about me, Denver? She mentioned it specifically." Sam frowned. "That's odd, I haven't said anything. Could someone at the telegraph office have talked?" "Possible, but not likely. Old man Turner takes his job seriously." Sam offered her his arm as they navigated a muddy section of the street. "Try not to worry too much. Even if she has heard rumors, Beatrice Montgomery isn't the final word in this town." Zara wished she could share his confidence, but she'd seen how small towns worked. Gossip spread faster than wildfire and could be just as destructive. Her fears proved well-founded. By Tuesday, Zara noticed a distinct change in how she was treated around town. The shopkeeper's wife, who had always been chatty, suddenly became all business. Mrs. Whittaker watched her with speculative eyes at breakfast. Even Miss Abernathy seemed more distant, making excuses about schoolwork when Zara suggested their usual tea. It came to a head on Wednesday, when Zara arrived at the Sentinel to find Sam in a heated discussion with Mayor Montgomery, a portly man whose cherubic appearance belied a shrewd political mind. "All I'm saying, Dawson, is that appearances matter in a town like ours," the mayor was saying. We're trying to attract investors, respectable families. Having a woman of questionable background so prominently employed sends the wrong message. There's nothing questionable about Mrs. Donovan's background, Sam retorted, his voice tight with anger. She's a widow who needed work. I gave her a job. End of story. That's not what my wife heard, Mayor Montgomery replied, and Beatrice has excellent sources in Denver. Zara stepped forward, unable to hide in the doorway any longer. I'm sorry to interrupt, gentlemen, but I believe you're discussing me. Both men turned, the mayor looking uncomfortable, Sam looking furious. Mrs. Donovan, the mayor said, recovering quickly. I was just expressing some concerns to Mr. Dawson about my past, Zara finished for him. Yes, I heard. What exactly has Mrs. Montgomery heard from her sources in Denver, Mayor? The mayor cleared his throat. Well, that you left under something of a cloud, that your husband isn't deceased but very much alive, that you abandoned your marriage without cause. I see. Zara's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. And did these sources happen to mention why I left? I'm not sure that's relevant. It's entirely relevant, Zara interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. If you're going to judge me based on rumors, you should at least have all the facts. The mayor looked to Sam, who nodded encouragingly. Go ahead, Zara. Tell him. Drawing a deep breath, Zara recounted her story once more. The marriage, the growing desperation as no children came, the final humiliation of being cast aside for her deficiency. I didn't abandon my marriage, Mayor Montgomery, she concluded. I was discarded because I couldn't fulfill the one purpose society deemed valuable in a wife. I came here hoping to build a life based on who I am, not what my body can or cannot do. The mayor had the grace to look abashed. I hadn't heard that part of the story, Mrs. Donovan. I apologize if we've misjudged you. The question now, Sam interjected, is what you intend to do with this information. Zara is a valued member of this community and my newspaper. I won't have her hounded out of town because of gossip. Mayor Montgomery straightened his vest. Well, that depends largely on Mrs. Montgomery, I'm afraid. Once Beatrice gets an idea in her head, then perhaps I should speak with Mrs. Montgomery directly, Zara suggested. Woman to woman. That might be best, the mayor agreed, clearly relieved to hand the problem off. She's hosting her weekly tea this afternoon at 3. I'm sure she would welcome you. After the mayor left, Sam turned to Zara with concern. Are you sure about this? Beatrice Montgomery can be formidable. Zara smiled wryly. So can I when necessary. Besides, what choice do I have? If I'm to stay in Monticello, I need her approval or at least her neutrality. You don't have to stay, Sam said quietly. You could move on, start fresh somewhere else where no one knows your story. The thought had occurred to Zara, but she had dismissed it almost immediately. No, she said firmly. I'm tired of running. This is my home now and I intend to fight for it. Sam's face broke into a proud grin. That's my girl. The words, casual as they were, sent a warm flutter through Zara's chest. His girl. It was foolish to read anything into it, she knew, just an expression. But for the rest of the morning, as they worked side by side on the latest edition of the Sentinel, Zara found herself replaying those 3 words in her mind, savoring them like a precious gift. At precisely 3 o'clock, Zara presented herself at the Montgomery residence, a grand 2-story house that reflected the mayor's status as one of Monticello's founding citizens. A maid showed her into a formal parlor where 5 of the town's leading ladies, including Mrs. Montgomery, were already enjoying tea and small cakes. Conversation stopped abruptly as Zara entered. Mrs. Montgomery's eyebrows rose in surprise, but she quickly recovered her composure. Mrs. Donovan, she said with artificial sweetness, what an unexpected pleasure. We weren't expecting you to join us today. Mayor Montgomery suggested I might be welcome, Zara replied, remaining standing as no one had invited her to sit. He thought we might benefit from a private conversation, but I see you have other guests. Yes, well, Mrs. Montgomery glanced at her companions, clearly torn between her desire to maintain appearances and her curiosity. Finally, curiosity won out. Ladies, would you excuse Mrs. Donovan and me for a few moments? We have a small matter to discuss. The other women, clearly disappointed to be missing what promised to be an interesting confrontation, reluctantly departed to the adjoining room, leaving Zara alone with her nemesis. You have considerable nerve coming here, Mrs. Montgomery said once they were alone, dropping all pretense of politeness. I prefer to address problems directly, Zara replied, taking a seat across from the older woman without waiting for an invitation. And it seems we have a problem, Mrs. Montgomery. Indeed we do. You've been living in my town under false pretenses, working unchaperoned with a bachelor, and generally flouting the standards of decent society. And you've been spreading rumors about me without knowing the full story, Zara countered. Not very Christian behavior, if I may say so, Mrs. Montgomery's eyes narrowed. I know enough. You abandoned your husband. I was cast aside by my husband and his family because I couldn't bear children, Zara interrupted, her voice calm but firm. I was given a settlement and told to disappear so that Thomas could make a more advantageous match with a woman who could give him heirs. I came west because I had nowhere else to go. The blunt statement seemed to take Mrs. Montgomery aback. She studied Zara with new interest. Is that the truth? Every word. You can confirm it with your Denver sources if you wish. The Wilkins family would have given a different version of events, naturally, but ask about the timing of Thomas's new engagement to Sophia Carrington just weeks after my departure. Mrs. Montgomery was silent for a long moment, absently stroking the cameo brooch at her throat. Finally, she sighed. I had 5 miscarriages before William Jr. was born, she said quietly. After the 3rd, my husband's mother suggested he find someone more reliable. Thankfully, William refused. The unexpected confession caught Zara by surprise. I'm sorry for your losses. Ancient history now, Mrs. Montgomery said, waving a hand dismissively. The point is, I understand something of what you've endured, but that doesn't change the fact that you're still legally married to another man. Your presence here, especially working so closely with Mr. Dawson, creates talk. I've given no one any reason to talk, Zara said firmly. My relationship with Mr. Dawson is purely professional. Is it? Mrs. Montgomery raised a skeptical eyebrow. Because anyone with eyes can see the way that man looks at you, Mrs. Donovan, and if I'm not mistaken, the way you look at him. Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. Mrs. Montgomery leaned forward. Listen to me carefully. I hold no ill will toward you for your situation. What your husband did was cruel, but as long as you remain married to him, any attachment to Mr. Dawson would be improper and potentially scandalous. There is no attachment, Zara insisted, though even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. There was something between her and Sam, something that had been growing steadily these past months. See that it stays that way, Mrs. Montgomery said firmly. I'll speak to the ladies about your circumstances discreetly, of course. Most will sympathize, I think. But you must be beyond reproach in your behavior if you wish to remain accepted in Monticello society. It wasn't the unconditional acceptance Zara had hoped for, but it was better than outright rejection. Thank you, Mrs. Montgomery. I appreciate your understanding. The older woman nodded. Don't mistake understanding for approval, Mrs. Donovan. I still believe the proper thing would be for you to obtain a legal divorce before pursuing other interests." Zara stood, recognizing the conversation was at an end. "I have no plans to pursue anything except my work at the Sentinel, Mrs. Montgomery. Good day." As she walked back to the newspaper office, Zara mulled over the conversation. Mrs. Montgomery had offered a tentative olive branch, but at a price. Zara must maintain absolute propriety, especially regarding Sam. The implication that there was already something between them that needed controlling was both alarming and, if Zara was honest with herself, a little thrilling. Did Sam look at her in some special way that others had noticed? And did she look at him with the same transparent longing? The thought was mortifying. More importantly, what was she to do about it? Mrs. Montgomery was right as long as Zara remained married to Thomas. Any romantic entanglement would be scandalous, potentially ruinous for both her and Sam. But divorce was difficult to obtain, expensive, and would require returning to Denver to face the very humiliation she'd fled. When she returned to the Sentinel, Sam was waiting anxiously. "How did it go?" he asked as soon as she entered. "Better than I expected," Zara admitted. "She was surprisingly understanding about my reasons for leaving Denver. She's going to explain the situation to the other ladies." Relief washed over Sam's face. "That's wonderful news." "There are conditions," Zara added, unable to meet his eyes. "I'm to be absolutely proper in my behavior." "Especially regarding you." "Me?" Sam looked genuinely puzzled. "Mrs. Montgomery seems to think that there might be feelings between us that go beyond professional respect." There was a long pause, during which Zara became acutely aware of the ticking of the clock on the wall and the distant sounds of horses and wagons on the street outside. "And what did you tell her?" Sam finally asked, his voice oddly constrained. Zara forced herself to look up at him. "I told her there was no attachment, that our relationship was purely professional." Something flickered in Sam's eyes: disappointment, relief. She couldn't tell. "I see," he said. "Well, that was the right thing to say, I suppose, given your situation." "Yes," Zara agreed, though the word felt hollow. "Given my situation." They stood looking at each other for a moment longer, 1,000 unspoken words hanging in the air between them. Then Sam cleared his throat and turned away, gesturing toward the stack of papers on his desk. "We should get back to work. The edition needs to be out by tomorrow morning." And just like that, the moment passed, and they returned to their familiar roles of editor and assistant. But something had shifted between them. Some unacknowledged truth had been brought to light, and Zara knew their carefully maintained boundaries would never be quite the same again. The weeks that followed were some of the most confusing of Zara's life. True to her word, Mrs. Montgomery had spoken to the ladies of Monticello, and gradually the cold shoulders and whispers subsided. Zara was included once again in Miss Abernathy's tea invitations, and even received a nod of acknowledgement from Mrs. Harrington at the general store. But the real change was in her relationship with Sam. On the surface, everything remained professional. They worked side by side at the Sentinel, discussing articles, editing copy, planning future editions. Sam was unfailingly courteous, respectful of her space and opinions. Yet there was a new awareness between them, a tension that hummed like a taut wire whenever they were alone together. Zara found herself noticing small details about him that she'd overlooked before: the way the corner of his mouth quirked up when he was amused, but trying not to show it, the precise movements of his hands as he set type, the low timbre of his voice when he spoke just to her. And sometimes, when she looked up from her work, she would catch him watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. They never spoke of it, this unnamed thing growing between them, To acknowledge it would be to face impossible choices. And so they maintained the fiction that nothing had changed, that they were merely colleagues who respected each other's abilities. Winter settled over Monticello, bringing bitter cold and heavy snow that transformed the dusty streets into white canyons between buildings. The work at the newspaper continued, though news was scarcer with travel more difficult. Sam began writing a series of profiles on the town's founding families, which proved popular with readers eager for distraction during the long winter evenings. It was after interviewing old Calvin Jenkins, one of the original settlers, that Sam returned to the office with an idea that would change everything. "We should write a book," he announced, stamping snow from his boots as he entered the warm office. Zara looked up from her typewriter. "A book." "About what?" "About Monticello. Its history, its people. Jenkins has incredible stories about the early days Indian attacks, blizzards that lasted weeks, the gold rush. And he's not the only one. There's a wealth of material here that deserves more than just newspaper articles." His enthusiasm was infectious, and Zara found herself nodding. It would be fascinating, a real chronicle of frontier life. "Exactly," Sam grinned, unwinding his scarf. "We could work on it together. Your writing style complements mine perfectly. You have an eye for the human details that I sometimes miss." The idea of a shared project, something beyond the weekly routine of the newspaper, sent a thrill through Zara. "I'd love that." "We could start interviewing people right away," Sam continued, warming to his subject as he hung up his coat. "Maybe even include photographs. My cousin in St. Louis has a camera. I could write and ask him to send it." They spent the rest of the afternoon outlining their plan, making lists of potential subjects to interview, debating the structure of the book. Their excitement built as the project took shape, and Zara found herself laughing more than she had in months as they bounced ideas off each other. It was only as the winter daylight began to fade, and Sam lit the lamps that illuminated the office in a warm glow, that Zara realized how close they were sitting, heads bent together over their notes. She could smell the clean scent of his soap, feel the warmth radiating from his body. She pulled back slightly, remembering Mrs. Montgomery's warning. "It's getting late. I should head back to the boarding house before Mrs. Whittaker locks the door." Sam glanced at the clock and nodded, though reluctance was clear in his expression. "Of course. We can continue this tomorrow." As Zara gathered her things, Sam helped her with her coat, his hands lingering briefly on her shoulders. "I'm glad you like the idea," he said softly. "This book. It feels right, doesn't it? The two of us working on it together." Zara nodded, not trusting her voice. It did feel right, too right, perhaps. And that was precisely what worried her. The following Sunday, a blizzard howled through Monticello, making church services impossible. Zara spent the morning in the boarding house parlor, reading and trying to ignore the restlessness that plagued her. She missed seeing Sam, she realized. After spending 6 days a week in his company, Sundays always felt oddly empty without their conversations. A knock at the front door roused her from her thoughts. Mrs. Whittaker answered it, and Zara heard the low rumble of a familiar voice. Moments later, the landlady appeared in the parlor doorway. "Mr. Dawson to see you," she announced, with a pointed look that reminded Zara of their agreement regarding gentlemen callers. "In the parlor only, mind." "Of course, Mrs. Whittaker," Zara assured her, setting aside her book. Sam entered, bringing with him a gust of cold air and snowflakes that melted quickly in the parlor's warmth. He held a package wrapped in brown paper. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, glancing at Mrs. Whittaker's retreating form. "I wanted to bring you this. It arrived on yesterday's mail coach." Curious, Zara accepted the package. It was surprisingly heavy. "What is it?" Open it and see. Unwrapping the paper, Zara found a beautiful leather-bound journal with creamy blank pages and a fountain pen nestled alongside it. "Sam," she breathed. "It's lovely." "For our book project," he explained, looking pleased at her reaction. "I thought you might want to start making notes, recording your impressions of the interviews we'll conduct." "It's perfect," she said, running her fingers over the soft leather. "Thank you." Sam smiled, then glanced toward the window where the snow continued to fall heavily. "I can't stay long. The storm's getting worse, and I promised Doc Wilson I'd help check on some of the older folks living on the outskirts of town." "That's very kind of you," Zara said, touched by his concern for others. Sam shrugged. "It's what neighbors do out here, look after each other." He paused, then added softly, "The way you've been looking after me these past months." "I've been working for you," Zara corrected him gently. "It's been more than that, and you know it." His blue eyes held hers, serious now. "You've brought something to the Sentinel and to my life that was missing before." The honesty in his voice made Zara's breath catch. This was dangerous territory, too close to the feelings they'd silently agreed not to discuss. "Sam," she began, but he held up a hand. I know what you're going to say, and you're right. Your situation is complicated, but I wanted you to know that." He hesitated, then continued in a rush. "That I consider you a blessing in my life, Zara Donovan, no matter what anyone else in this town might think. A blessing." The word struck Zara like a physical blow. How long had it been since anyone had considered her presence in their life a positive thing, let alone a blessing? Certainly not Thomas, who had come to view her as a disappointment, a failure. Not his family, who had seen her only as a means to continue their lineage. Not even her own family, long dead, who had married her off with the expectation that she would fulfill a woman's primary duty. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "I don't know what to say." Sam stepped closer, his expression gentle. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." He reached out and with infinite tenderness brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I should go before Mrs. Whittaker comes to check on us." Zara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Sam turned to leave, then paused at the parlor door. "Oh, and there was one other thing," he said, almost as an afterthought. "A letter came for you from Denver." Zara's heart sank. "Thomas, I think so. The return address was Wilkins." "Where is it?" "At the office. I'll give it to you tomorrow." Sam hesitated. "Do you want me to bring it by tonight instead?" Zara considered for a moment, then shook her head. "No, let it wait until tomorrow. I won't let Thomas Wilkins intrude on my Sunday." Sam smiled, looking relieved. "Tomorrow, then." After he left, Zara sat holding the journal, her emotions in turmoil. A blessing, he had called her. The word echoed in her mind, warming her from within despite the storm raging outside. For a few precious moments, she allowed herself to imagine a future where such words could be spoken freely between them, where there was no Thomas, no Denver, no shadow hanging over her. But reality intruded in the form of the letter waiting at the Sentinel office. Whatever Thomas had written, it would force her to confront the past she'd been trying to outrun. And that confrontation could destroy the fragile happiness she'd found in Monticello with Sam. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the blizzard having spent itself overnight. Zara made her way carefully through the snow-packed streets to the newspaper office, her mind preoccupied with what Thomas's letter might contain. A demand for her return, legal threats, or perhaps, though she hardly dared hope for it, a formal release from their marriage. Sam was already at work when she arrived, stoking the pot-bellied stove that heated the small office. He looked up as she entered, his expression a mixture of warmth and concern. "Good morning," he greeted her. "Sleep well?" "Not particularly," Zara admitted, unwinding her scarf. I kept thinking about that letter. Sam nodded in understanding and crossed to his desk. It's right here. You want privacy to read it? Zara hesitated, then shook her head. No, stay, please. Taking the envelope with Thomas's familiar handwriting, Zara sat at her desk and broke the seal. The letter was brief, but not what she had expected. Zara, I hope this finds you well. Your whereabouts were confirmed by the telegraph operator in Monticello, though he refused to provide details beyond your presence there. I trust you have found a situation suitable to your circumstances. Mother insists that I demand your return, but I see no purpose in it. We both know our marriage was a mistake from the beginning. I have petitioned the court for divorce on grounds of abandonment. You will be notified formally by my attorneys in due course. I am to be married in the spring to Sophia Carrington. She is already with child. I trust this news brings you no pain, as it confirms what we both suspected, that the fault in our union lay with you rather than me. Your settlement remains in the Denver National Bank. I have made no attempt to reclaim it, nor will I. Goodbye, Zara. I wish you what happiness is possible for someone in your condition. Thomas. Zara read the letter twice, aware of Sam watching her anxiously. When she finally looked up, she found it difficult to name the emotions churning inside her. Relief, certainly. Anger at Thomas's casual cruelty in mentioning Sophia's pregnancy, but also, unexpectedly, a profound sense of freedom. He's divorcing me, she said, her voice steadier than she felt, on grounds of abandonment. Sam's eyebrows rose in surprise. That's good news, isn't it? Yes, Zara agreed, though his method of delivering it was typically Thomas. She handed him the letter, watching as he read it quickly, his expression darkening as he reached the part about Sophia's pregnancy. What a bastard, Sam muttered. Pardon my language. Despite everything, Zara found herself smiling. It's all right, I've thought worse about him. Sam set the letter down and looked at her intently. Are you truly all right, Zara? This must be a shock, even if it's what you wanted. I'm better than all right, she realized as she said it. I'm free, or I will be once the divorce is finalized. Free to build a life here without looking over my shoulder. Free to. She stopped, suddenly aware of what she'd been about to say. Free to love again. Free to love you. Free to what? Sam prompted softly. Free to be whoever I choose to be, Zara finished, rising from her desk and moving to the window. The winter sun sparkled on the fresh snow, turning Monticello into a gleaming wonderland. Free to see what happens next. She felt rather than heard Sam move to stand behind her, close enough that she could sense his warmth but not quite touching. And what would you like to happen next, Zara? His voice was low, intimate. Zara turned to face him, their bodies now mere inches apart. I'd like to finish our book, she said. I'd like to continue working at the Sentinel, and I'd like. She paused, gathering her courage. I'd like to see where this path leads, the one you and I have been walking alongside each other these past months. Sam's eyes darkened, and he reached out to take her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a gesture that sent shivers up her arm. I'd like that too, he said. Very much. For a long moment they stood there, connected by that simple touch, the air between them charged with possibilities. Then Sam reluctantly released her hand and stepped back. But not yet, he said firmly. Not until the divorce is final. You've had enough scandal in your life, Zara. I won't add to it. As much as she wished it could be otherwise, Zara knew he was right. How long do you think it will take? I'm not sure. We could ask Judge Parker. He might know something about Colorado divorce law. The practical discussion of legal matters helped ground Zara, bringing her racing heart back to a normal rhythm. Yes, that's a good idea. They spent the rest of the morning working on the newspaper as usual, though there was a new lightness between them, a sense of hope that hadn't been there before. Every glance, Every casual brush of hands as they passed papers back and forth seemed imbued with promise. At lunchtime, Sam suggested they visit Judge Parker together. The elderly judge, who handled legal matters for Monticello and the surrounding county, maintained an office above the bank. He greeted them warmly, his rheumy eyes brightening at the prospect of discussing an interesting legal question. "Colorado territory, you say?" he mused after they explained Zara's situation. "Well now, their divorce laws are fairly progressive, especially regarding residency requirements. Your husband will need to establish abandonment, which typically requires a year's separation." "It's been nearly 5 months," Zara said, heart sinking. "So another 7 months at least," Judge Parker nodded sympathetically. "Approximately, unless—" He stroked his white beard thoughtfully. "Unless you were to contest the grounds." "Contest them," Zara frowned. "But I don't want to stop the divorce." "No, no," the judge chuckled. "I mean contest the grounds he's using and propose alternative grounds that might be processed more quickly. For instance, if you were to counter-petition on grounds of cruelty or desertion, him casting you out because of your inability to bear children could qualify. The court might expedite matters." Sam leaned forward eagerly. "How much faster could it be?" "Hard to say precisely," Judge Parker admitted. "But possibly as little as 3 months from the time your counter-petition is filed." 3 months. Zara could hardly believe it. In just 3 months, she could be truly free to begin again with Sam, if that was what they both wanted. "Would I need to return to Denver?" she asked, the thought of facing Thomas and his family again dampening her enthusiasm. "Not necessarily," the judge assured her. "You could engage an attorney there to represent you. I have a colleague in Denver who might be willing to take the case. I could write to him if you wish." "Please," Zara said gratefully. "And thank you for your help, Judge Parker." As they left the judge's office, Sam reached for Zara's hand, giving it a quick squeeze before releasing it. 3 months, he said, his eyes alight with the same hope that was blossoming in her heart. "We can wait 3 months." "Yes," Zara agreed, though part of her wished they didn't have to wait at all. 3 months. Spring came early to Wyoming that year. By late March, the snow had mostly melted, leaving the streets of Monticello muddy but passable. Green shoots appeared in Mrs. Whitaker's garden, and the distant mountains shed their white caps for the first time in months. Zara had thrown herself into work during the waiting period, both at the newspaper and on their book project. She and Sam had conducted dozens of interviews with Monticello's oldest residents, collecting stories of frontier hardship and triumph that would form the heart of their chronicle. The writing was going well, with Sam focusing on the historical aspects, while Zara captured the human stories that brought the town's past to life. Their professional partnership had deepened during these months, but true to his word, Sam had maintained a respectful distance otherwise. There were moments, a lingering glance, a hand resting a moment too long on her shoulder, words that carried double meanings that reminded Zara of what waited on the other side of her divorce. But for the most part, they channeled their feelings into their work, creating something together that neither could have accomplished alone. The town had largely accepted their partnership, especially after Mrs. Montgomery had given it her grudging approval. "As long as proprieties are observed," she had told Zara during one of her weekly teas, to which Zara was now regularly invited. "I see no reason why 2 intelligent individuals shouldn't collaborate professionally." The fact that Sam had recently purchased a small house on the edge of town, with a garden plot and a view of the mountains, did not go unremarked upon by the local gossips. Nor did his careful renovation of the property, which included new curtains and a rocking chair on the porch that seemed more suited to a woman's tastes than a bachelor's. It was early April when the letter arrived from Judge Parker's colleague in Denver. Zara's hands trembled as she opened it in the privacy of her room at the boarding house. The legal language was dense, but the message was clear. The divorce had been granted. Thomas had not contested her counter-petition, likely eager to proceed with his wedding to Sophia, whose child would be born in the summer. Zara was free. She sat on the edge of her bed, the letter clutched in her hand, overwhelmed by the finality of it. After all the months of waiting, of careful distance and unspoken promises, the moment had arrived. But what now? Should she go to Sam immediately, or wait for him to come to her? The question was answered by a knock at her door. Mrs. Whittaker stood there, looking slightly flustered. "Mr. Dawson is downstairs," she announced. "He insists on speaking with you immediately. I told him it's not proper for a gentleman to call on a lady in her boarding house at this hour, but he was most persistent." "It's all right, Mrs. Whittaker," Zara assured her, tucking the letter into her pocket. "I'll come down." Sam was pacing the small parlor when Zara entered, his hat in his hands, his hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his fingers through it in agitation. He stopped when he saw her, his eyes immediately finding hers, questioning. "It came," Zara said simply, patting the pocket containing the letter. "It's done." The tension visibly drained from Sam's shoulders. "Thank God," he murmured. Then more loudly for Mrs. Whittaker's benefit. "I came to ask if you would like to take a walk, Mrs. Donovan. It's a fine evening." Mrs. Whittaker sniffed disapprovingly but didn't object as Zara fetched her shawl. The April evening was indeed lovely, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of new growth and the promise of the summer to come. They walked in silence until they reached the edge of town, where the houses gave way to open country. Only then did Sam stop and turn to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I've waited so long to do this properly," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "To tell you what's in my heart without reservation or guilt." Zara's pulse quickened. "And what is in your heart, Sam?" "You," he said simply. "From almost the first moment you walked into my office with your head held high despite everything you'd been through, your courage, your intelligence, your kindness, they've become as essential to me as breathing." Zara felt tears well in her eyes. "And you to me," she whispered. "When everyone else saw only what I lacked, you saw me, the whole of me, and called it a blessing." Sam reached up to cup her face gently in his hands. "Because that's what you are, Zara. A blessing I never expected and certainly don't deserve. I love you. I think I've loved you since that day you stood in my office and told me your story without flinching, without shame." "I love you too," Zara said, the words she'd held back for so long finally flowing freely. "I love your passion for this town, for your newspaper. I love your kindness to everyone you meet. I love the way you see the best in people, even when they can't see it in themselves." Sam smiled, his eyes shining with unshed tears of his own. "Then may I kiss you, Zara Donovan, as a free woman with nothing standing between us." "Please," she breathed. His lips met hers with exquisite gentleness, a first kiss that held both reverence and promise. Zara's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. The kiss deepened, months of restrained longing finally finding expression until they were both breathless. When they finally parted, Sam rested his forehead against hers, unwilling to put any more distance between them than necessary. "Marry me," he said softly. "Be my wife, my partner in everything. Help me build a life here in Monticello." "Yes," Zara replied without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." They were married 2 weeks later in the town church, with Reverend Taylor officiating and seemingly the entire population of Monticello in attendance. Miss Abernathy served as Zara's maid of honor, while the town sheriff stood up as Sam's best man. Mrs. Montgomery had insisted on organizing the reception, which was held in the town hall and featured enough food to feed a small army. To Zara's surprise, Mrs. Whitaker had tearfully presented her with a beautiful handmade quilt as a wedding gift. "I've been working on it since February," the landlady confessed. "I could see which way the wind was blowing with you two, divorce or no divorce." The newlyweds moved into Sam's small house immediately after the wedding. That first night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Zara confessed her deepest fear. "I still can't have children, Sam. That hasn't changed with the divorce or our marriage, if you're hoping for a family." Sam gathered her closer in his arms. "Zara, love, I married you, not your womb. If children come, they'll be welcomed joyfully. If not, we'll build our family in other ways." "What ways?" she asked, curious. "Well, there are always children who need homes," Sam said thoughtfully. "Orphans, or little ones whose parents can't care for them. Or maybe we'll be the favorite aunt and uncle to our friends' children. Family isn't just about blood, Zara. It's about love, about choosing to belong to each other." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes as she nestled closer to her husband. "How did I find someone like you?" "Pure luck," Sam teased, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Or maybe fate. Either way, I'm the fortunate one." The months that followed were the happiest of Zara's life. She continued working at the Sentinel, now as co-editor rather than assistant. Their book project progressed steadily, with the manuscript nearly complete by the fall. Their home became a gathering place for friends, with Sam building a large dining table to accommodate their frequent dinner guests. It was during one such dinner, with Miss Abernathy, Judge Parker, and the sheriff in attendance, that the conversation turned to the orphan train that would be passing through Monticello the following week. "They're bringing children from the orphanages in New York," Miss Abernathy explained. "Hoping to find homes for them here in the West. I've agreed to let them use the schoolhouse for well, I suppose you'd call it a viewing." "A viewing," Zara repeated, disturbed by the term. "As if the children are items for sale," the schoolteacher grimaced. "I know it sounds terrible, but the intentions are good. These children have no futures in the city slums. Here, they at least have a chance at a decent life." "How many children will be on the train?" Sam asked, a thoughtful expression on his face. 20 or so, I believe. Ages ranging from about 3 to 12. After their guests had departed, Sam found Zara standing on the porch, gazing up at the star-filled Wyoming sky. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned back against his solid warmth. "You're thinking about the orphan train," he said, not a question. Zara nodded. "Those poor children, sent so far from everything they know to be chosen or not chosen by strangers. We could go," Sam suggested quietly, "to the viewing, not to gawk but to see if there might be a child who needs us as much as we could love them." Turning in his arms, Zara searched his face. "Are you serious? You would want to adopt one of those children?" "Why not?" Sam's expression was earnest. "You said yourself they need homes." "We have one to offer, a good one, with love and security. And I meant what I said on our wedding night, Zara. There are many ways to build a family." Tears welled in Zara's eyes as she pressed her palm to his cheek. "Just when I think I couldn't possibly love you more, Samuel Dawson, you prove me wrong." He turned his head to kiss her palm. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," she agreed. "Let's go to the viewing." The orphan train arrived on a crisp October morning, pulling into Monticello's small station with a blast of its whistle and a cloud of steam. A crowd had gathered, curiosity mingled with genuine interest in the children who might soon become part of their community. Zara and Sam stood slightly apart from the main throng, watching as a stern-looking woman in a plain black dress marshaled a line of children off the train. They ranged in age just as Miss Abernathy had said, from tiny ones clutching the hands of older children to gangly preteens trying to appear brave. All wore clean but well-worn clothes, tags with their names and ages pinned to their chests like merchandise. "This feels wrong," Zara murmured as they followed the procession to the schoolhouse. "Like they're being displayed." Sam squeezed her hand. "I know, but let's focus on the good we might do today, not the method." Inside the schoolhouse, the children were arranged on the small stage at the front of the room, the youngest ones seated on benches, the older ones standing behind them. The woman in black, who introduced herself as Mrs. Simmons from the New York Children's Aid Society, gave a brief speech about the children's backgrounds and the society's mission to find them good Christian homes with moral families. Then the viewing began in earnest, with local families approaching the stage to speak with individual children. Some were clearly looking for older boys who could help with farm work, others for girls who could assist with housekeeping or child minding. A few seemed genuinely interested in providing a loving home regardless of utility. Zara and Sam moved slowly along the edge of the room, observing rather than participating directly in the selection process. It was near the back of the stage, partially hidden behind the other children, that Zara noticed a small girl of about 7. Unlike the others who were eagerly trying to make eye contact with potential parents, this child stood with her shoulders hunched, gaze fixed on the floor. Her brown hair was neatly braided, but her frame was painfully thin, her wrists like twigs protruding from the too short sleeves of her dress. Something about the girl's determined invisibility tugged at Zara's heart. She nudged Sam and nodded toward the child. "What about her, the little one in the back?" Sam followed her gaze and nodded. "Let's find out more about her." They approached Mrs. Simmons, who was watching the proceedings with the critical eye of someone evaluating livestock transactions. "Excuse me," Zara said politely. "Could you tell us about the small girl at the back, the one with the braids?" Mrs. Simmons squinted in the direction Zara indicated. "Oh, Emma. 7 years old, parents both dead from influenza. Quiet child, bit on the sickly side. Not much use for farm work if that's what you're looking for." "We're not looking for a farm hand," Sam said, his voice tight with barely suppressed anger at the woman's callous assessment. "We're looking for a child to love." The woman raised her eyebrows, clearly skeptical. "Well, she's available. No one else has shown interest. She doesn't speak much, though. Might be simple. Or might be traumatized from losing her parents and being shipped halfway across the country," Zara countered, unable to contain her irritation. "May we speak with her?" With Mrs. Simmons's reluctant permission, Zara and Sam approached the small girl. Up close, her fragility was even more apparent, but Zara also noticed the intelligence in her wary brown eyes as they lifted briefly to assess the newcomers, before dropping back to the floor. "Hello, Emma," Zara said gently, crouching down to be at eye level with the child. "My name is Zara, and this is my husband, Sam." The girl gave no indication that she'd heard, continuing to stare at her scuffed shoes. "We live here in Monticello," Zara continued, undeterred. "Sam runs the newspaper, and I work there too. We have a small house with a garden and a very friendly cat named Printer who showed up on our doorstep last month." At the mention of the cat, Emma's eyes flickered up momentarily, a hint of interest breaking through her defensive shell. "He's orange," Sam added, also crouching down. "With white paws that look like he stepped in paint. He's a terrible mouser but excellent at cuddling." The ghost of a smile touched Emma's lips before quickly disappearing. "Would you like to meet him?" Zara asked. "Printer, I mean, and maybe see our house. It's not very big, but there's a room that would be perfect for a little girl. It has a window that looks out on the mountains." Emma's eyes lifted again, this time meeting Zara's directly. "Why do you want me?" she asked, her voice so soft it was barely audible. "Nobody ever wants me." Zara felt her heart crack at the resignation in the child's voice. "We want you because we have love to give, and you deserve to be loved, Emma. Every child does." "But I'm not strong," the girl whispered. "I can't do much work, and I get sick sometimes." "We don't need you to work," Sam assured her. "We just want you to be part of our family, to be safe and happy and loved." Emma studied them both for a long moment, suspicion warring with desperate hope in her eyes. "For real? Not just until you get tired of me or find someone better?" "For real," Zara promised. "Forever." It took several hours of paperwork and a thorough examination of their home and circumstances by Mrs. Simmons, but by sunset that day, Emma was officially placed with the Dawsons for a trial period of 6 months, after which the adoption could be finalized. As Zara tucked the exhausted child into bed in the small room, they had hastily prepared moving Sam's writing desk out and bringing in a bed borrowed from Mrs. Whittaker. Until they could purchase one, she marveled at how quickly life could change. That morning they had been a couple, now they were on their way to becoming a family. "Is this really my room?" Emma asked sleepily, her small hand clutching Zara's. All of it," Zara confirmed, smoothing the quilt over the girl's thin shoulders. "And tomorrow we'll go to the general store and pick out fabric for curtains and maybe a new dress or two." "I've never had a new dress," Emma murmured, her eyes already drifting closed. "Or my own room." "Well, you have both now," Zara whispered, leaning down to press a kiss to the child's forehead. "Sweet dreams, Emma." When she returned to the kitchen, she found Sam sitting at the table, a stunned expression on his face. "We have a daughter," he said, as if he couldn't quite believe it. Zara smiled, coming to sit beside him and taking his hand. "We have a daughter." "She's so tiny, Zara, so wounded by life already." His voice caught. "What if we can't heal those wounds?" "We will," Zara said with certainty. "Not overnight and maybe not completely. But we'll love her, and that's a powerful medicine." The next months brought challenges neither Zara nor Sam had anticipated. Emma's quiet demeanor initially masked a deep well of fear and grief that occasionally erupted in nightmares or fits of temper. She was indeed prone to illness, catching every cold that passed through Monticello, and spending much of November confined to bed with a persistent cough that had Doc Wilson visiting daily. But there were joys, too, unexpected moments of connection that showed the bright spirit beneath Emma's protective shell. The day she laughed for the first time, a full-throated giggle when Printer knocked over a stack of papers in the newspaper office. The morning, Zara came downstairs to find Emma and Sam making pancakes together, flour dusting both their faces. The afternoon, Emma brought home a drawing from school labeled "My Family," showing 3 stick figures holding hands. By Christmas, the trial period was only half complete, but there was no doubt in anyone's mind that Emma was a Dawson. The small house was transformed by the child's presence, filled with evidence of her growing security books left open on the sofa, a doll seated at the kitchen table, small boots by the door alongside the adult pairs. It was on Christmas Eve, as they sat around the fire after a simple but festive dinner, that Emma asked the question that had clearly been on her mind for some time. "Why don't you have any real children?" she said suddenly, looking up from the new book Sam had given her. "Children that came from your tummy," she clarified, pointing at Zara. The question caught Zara off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Children were direct, and Emma was observant enough to have noticed that most families in Monticello included biological children. Sam glanced at Zara, silently asking if she wanted him to answer, but Zara shook her head slightly. This was something she needed to explain herself. "Some women's bodies don't make babies, Emma," she said gently. "Mine is one of them. I tried for a long time with. Before I was married to Sam, but no babies came." "Is that why your first husband didn't want you anymore?" Emma asked, connecting dots with the perceptiveness of a child who had seen too much of life's harsh realities. Zara nodded, seeing no point in lying. "Yes. He wanted children and I couldn't give them to him." Emma considered this seriously. "That was stupid of him," she declared finally. "You're the best mother ever, even if I didn't come from your tummy." Tears sprang to Zara's eyes at the simple statement. "Thank you, sweetheart. And you're the best daughter ever, no matter how you came to us." "And what about me?" Sam interjected with mock indignation. "Where do I rank in this family?" Emma giggled. "You're the best father, of course, and the best newspaper man, and the best pancake maker." "High praise indeed," Sam said, reaching out to ruffle her hair affectionately. Later that night, after Emma was asleep with her new doll clutched in her arms, Zara and Sam sat by the dying fire, his arm around her shoulders as she leaned against his chest. "You are, you know," he said softly. "The best mother." Zara tilted her head to look up at him. "You really think so, even though I've never given birth, especially because of that," Sam said firmly. "You chose to be Emma's mother. You're pouring all the maternal love that's been dammed up inside you into this one small girl who desperately needed it. That makes you not just a good mother, but an exceptional one." Zara smiled, thinking of the child sleeping peacefully in the next room, secure in the knowledge that she was loved unconditionally. "We're blessed, aren't we, all of us?" Sam pressed a kiss to her temple. "We are, and do you know what? The whole town sees it too. I overheard Mrs. Montgomery telling the Reverend's wife just last week that you were a natural mother, that your barrenness had clearly been God's way of saving you for the child who truly needed you." Zara gave a small snort of laughter. "Mrs. Montgomery said that?" "The same woman who once all but called me a scandalous adulteress." "The very same," Sam confirmed with a chuckle. "Apparently you've risen greatly in her estimation since then." "Well, miracles never cease," Zara murmured, snuggling closer to her husband's warmth. In the years that followed, the Dawson family became a fixture in Monticello. Their book, Voices of the Frontier, the story of Monticello, was published to local acclaim and modest success further afield. The Sentinel thrived under their joint leadership, expanding to twice-weekly publication. Emma grew from a fragile, wary child into a confident young woman with her mother's intelligence and her father's compassion. When Emma was 12, the Dawsons took in another child from a subsequent orphan train, a boy of 10 named Jack, whose quick mind and gentle nature made him a perfect addition to their family. 2 years after that, they informally adopted 16-year-old Sarah, a local girl whose parents had died in a fire, leaving her with nowhere to go. Zara's inability to bear biological children, once a source of such shame and rejection, became almost irrelevant in the face of the family she and Sam had created through choice and love. The town that might once have scorned her for her deficiency instead came to see her as a blessing, a woman whose apparent limitation had led to homes for children who might otherwise have had none. On their 15th wedding anniversary, as Zara and Sam stood on their porch watching Emma, Jack, and Sarah chatting and laughing as they prepared a surprise celebration in the garden, Sam wrapped his arm around his wife's waist and pulled her close. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. Zara shook her head, leaning into his embrace. "Not a single one. Every path that led me here, even the painful ones, was worth it for this life we've built together. Even being cast out by Thomas, especially that," Zara said with a smile. "It was the worst thing I could imagine at the time, but now I see it was the best thing that could have happened to me." It brought me to you, to Monticello, to our children." Sam pressed a kiss to her hair, now streaked with the first threads of silver. "You know, I never told you this, but the day you walked into my newspaper office looking for work, old Mrs. Jenkins was in earlier complaining about how hard it was to find good help. I could have sent you to her instead. Why didn't you?" Zara asked, curious about this revelation after so many years. Sam's eyes, still as blue and warm as the day they'd met, crinkled at the corners as he smiled down at her. "Because the moment I saw you, I knew you were meant to stay. You were my blessing, Zara Donovan. You still are." From the garden, Emma called for them to come see the anniversary surprise they'd prepared, a recreation of their wedding day cake, and a hand-drawn family portrait that included not just the five of them, but also the succession of cats who had made their home with the Dawsons over the years. As they walked hand in hand toward their children, their family created by choice rather than blood, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the scared, ashamed woman who had arrived in Monticello with nothing but a bundle of belongings and the weight of rejection heavy on her shoulders, to this, a woman surrounded by love, respected by her community, fulfilled in her work and family life. She had been cast out for infertility, but found instead a place where her worth was measured by her heart, not her womb. A place where a man had called her his blessing, and eventually an entire town had come to believe it too.